Shalom, holy initiates and holy adepts. This is part two of a series on Adam Qadmon, and I want to begin this video by making a few introductory points, beginning with something that I feel I failed to mention and emphasize in part one, which is that essentially, what needs to be understood is that there are principally two Adam Qadmonim, in the Garden of Eden. And unfortunately, the vast majority of Kabbalists throughout time um, just have not been aware of this knowledge. And it is only known by a very small handful of Kabbalists throughout the generations, those that have been initiated at the highest levels, such as myself. And unfortunately, I think this is because Sefer HaZohar only speaks of one Adam Kadmon. Okay, and so what needs to be understood is that it is a very great secret that there are principally two Adam Kadmonim being spoken of in the text, right? And our most ancient Kabbalistic treatise that explains this is, the treatises dealing with allegorical interpretation by our most ancient Grandmaster Kabbalist, Philo-Judaeus, who was a contemporary of Yeshua HaMashiach, right? And there are a few other esoteric Kabbalistic books that do briefly touch upon this great secret. One of them actually being Sefer Tikkunei HaZohar, which not only speaks of the two Adam Kadmonim, but actually penetrates the text on a level even much deeper and more profound than that. That's what makes Tikkunei HaZohar a very special Kabbalistic book, because it penetrates certain verses at very, very deep levels. Again, just briefly, it's just very sad that most Kabbalists don't know this great secret, that principally there are two Adam Kadmonim spoken of in the Garden of Eden, right? And it should be known by now that these two Adam Kadmonim are principally Mashiach and his evil twin brother, Lucifer or Samael. So then this leads me to just then go over review a few key points that were discussed in part one before we move into the heart of the matter, in this video. So, the first point I want to, bring up and emphasize is the great Kabbalistic mystery behind Sefer Devarim, chapter 20, verse 19, where we're given a very Kabbalistic equation in the underlying original Hebrew, which is essentially that Adam is a tree, right? So it is through this verse that we are given one of the keys of Qabbalah, which is that the tree is an occult symbol representing man, or Adam, okay? And so then understanding this, right, when we go back to the Garden of Eden and we read about, that there are principally two trees in this garden, right? As a Kabbalist, we should know that these two trees mystically allude to the fact that there are two chief Elohim being spoken of, right? The tree of life represents the superior Adam Kadmon, which is Mashiach, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil represents the evil Adam Kadmon, which is Lucifer or Samael, okay? So again, by introducing these two trees, right, the text is mystically pointing to and alluding to two chief Elohim, vis-a-vis Mashiach and Lucifer. So that's the first critical point that I think needs to be understood, to contemplate, one of the first Kabbalistic proofs that indeed there are two, Adams being revealed and spoken of in the text. Of course, if you've seen part one, you should know all the other scriptural seals and proofs, that demonstrate this. So then this leads me to talk about the first holy serpentine, Elohim or couple, right? So, at this point, I would basically state that, I would consider a prerequisite to watching this video, making sure that you've watched not just part one of Adam Qadmon, but that you have also seen my series on Lilith, because having a knowledge and comprehension of the divine feminine is very requisite for understanding these points that I'm going to now make, which is that principally there are two couples, right? That the scriptures speak of, right? There are two couples. One is holy and one is evil, right? So, there are two Adams, but they each have brides or wives or mates, right? And so I want to first speak about the holy serpentine couple, which is essentially Mashiach and his bride, which is Esther or Shekhinah or Chawa, right? These are all just titles for our Heavenly Mother. And these are holy serpents, and this is the first serpentine couple, which is holy. Okay, and this is the great mystery of the serpent, in the desert in the generation of Moshe, right? I expect you listeners to have the very basic, understanding that most advanced Christians have, that this serpent that is raised up on a pole and kills the Israelites is a prototype for Mashiach, right? To most Christians, I think most Christians should have this advanced understanding of what this serpent represents, right? So the great mystery is found in Sefer Bamidbar in chapter 21, verse 9, where the original Hebrew reads like this. Waya'ash Moshe Nechash Nechosheth. So when you hear me pronounce that verse, you should phonetically notice the similarity between the last two words, right? The last two words are Nechosh, Nechosheth, right? My mistake, it's Nechash, Nechosheth, right? The first word I said, which is Nechash, is Hebrew for serpent. And then the last word there, Nechosheth, is Hebrew for bronze. Okay, and phonetically, as I'm sure you heard or noticed, they sound very similar. And as you can see here in the original Hebrew text, they're actually written almost the same, right? The only difference being by the Hebrew letter tau, right? But again, we need to understand that in the ancient original Torah scrolls, there are no vowel pointings, right? And this is to stress the polysemity of the text. And this is why we Kabbalists read and study and meditate on the text without the vowel pointings, so that we can then see all the other possible translations of the underlying text. Okay, so again, these words are polysemous, and that second word, nechoshet, which means bronze, can also mean serpent. Okay, as you can see, it's spelled pretty much the same as serpent is, right? That, without the vowel pointings, nechoshet can also read as a female serpent, right? So then the esoteric translation of this verse, as we Kabbalists understand and read it, is that, and Moshe made a male serpent, female serpent, meaning that Kabbalistically this verse is speaking of the creation of two serpents, one male and one female. Okay, so here we have our first Kabbalistic revelation of the holy serpentine couple, right? The male serpent represents Mashiach, and the female serpent represents his bride, who is Shekhinah or Chawa. Okay, and so again, this alludes to the holy mysteries, right? This alludes also to the fact that on one level we may state that certain symbols have a binary aspect to them. As an example, the serpent as a symbol in Qabbalah has a binary aspect to it, right? You have a good serpent and you have a bad serpent, right? The holy serpent, which is our Heavenly Father Mashiach, right, is a holy serpent, as is revealed in these verses in HaTorah. Okay, but there's also an evil serpent, right? And each one of them has a female serpent or a mate, right? Mashiach's female serpent is his bride, which is Hawa, and then Lucifer's mate will of course then be his wife, which is Lilith, right? So then that then proceeds me to speak on the evil serpentine couple, which is of course Samael and Lilith, right? These are the evil serpents. And this is the mystery of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, right? So we have, the serpent revealed to us in the Holy Scriptures on two levels, right? the mystery of the holy serpentine couple, is found in the narrative dealing with Moshe and the generation of Moshe when he raises that serpent up on a pole to heal the Israelites, and the mystery of the evil serpentine couple is found in the Garden of Eden, right? And so then this leads me to talk, this leads me to explain some further verses in the Holy Scriptures that reveal this evil serpentine couple, right? I've already demonstrated one verse on a very Kabbalistic level that shows and reveals the holy serpentine couple. Now I'm going to show some verses that reveal the evil serpentine couple, okay? Beginning with Sefer Yeshayahu, chapter 27, verse 1, where it reads, "On that day Adonai will punish Luyatan, the apostate serpent, and the crooked serpent, and he shall slay or kill the dragons in the sea." Okay, so now I'm going to Kabbalistically parse and analyze this verse, right? So the first thing that needs to be understood is that the beginning part of the verse speaks of two serpents, right? Again, Kabbalistically, this alludes to the male and female serpent, which are evil, okay? Now, the first mention of the serpent is male because the adjective used to describe him in the original Hebrew, which is bariach, is actually male, okay? So, or it's a masculine word, thus indicating that this serpent is masculine, okay? The second reference to the serpent, which is the crooked serpent, is the female serpent because the adjective used to describe that serpent is in a feminine construct. It's kind of very hard to explain here for those that don't know Hebrew, the nature and essence of this construct of this Hebrew word, which is akalaton, to describe the serpent. But all that needs to be known is that this is feminine. This adjective is in its feminine construct, and so this mystically alludes to the fact that this serpent is thus female, right? So the beginning part of the verse speaks of the male and female serpent, okay? Then the next critical point to understand is that the last mention, or the third mention of dragon or serpent in that verse, is the Hebrew word tanin, which is in the plural, okay? That Hebrew word ends with the Hebrew letter nun, which is a plural suffix, okay? And unfortunately, per my understanding, most English translations translate the last part of the verse incorrectly. They translate that instance as singular when in fact it's plural. The correct translation of the underlined Hebrew is, dragons in the sea, meaning that these are two. These dragons are two, meaning that on a very basic level of interpretation, this plurality is alluding to two dragons, okay, which were just spoken of, the male and female serpent, and he's going to kill both of them in the last part of the verse. So all in all, Kabbalistically, this verse, is revealing and speaking of the male and female serpent, the evil serpentine couple, essentially, okay? And unfortunately, the vast majority, if not all of Christians, don't have this full understanding of this verse, okay? The next verse, another verse that just happens to speak of the male serpent is in Sefer Tehillim in chapter 104, verse 26. It states, "There go the ships, there is Luyatan." Now, this verse is very, very Kabbalistic, and unfortunately, I don't have the time and space here to fully explain the full Kabbalistic significance of this verse. But for the purposes of this video, all that needs to be understood is that here we have a mention or a reference to the male evil serpent, which is Luyatan, which is one of his titles. Because again, the chief Elohim have many titles, right? Mashiach goes by many titles. His bride, Shekhinah, goes by many titles. Likewise, Lucifer and Lilith go by many titles. Luyatan is just one other such title that Lucifer goes by, okay? And an example of a direct reference or explicit reference to his bride, which is Lilith, is found in Sefer Eob in chapter 26, verse 12, where it reads, "Through his power he divideth the sea, and through understanding he smiteth Rahab," right? Now, Rahab, again, has many meanings, but we should understand that it is a feminine name, and it also signifies a female dragon or serpent, right? So Rahab is just another title for Lilith or Ashtar. right? So here we have another verse that explicitly speaks of her. Okay, now again, if you've seen my series on Lilith, I go more into depth on revealing Lilith from the Holy Scriptures, where I reveal more titles of her and I give a more in-depth understanding of Lilith. And so you know if you see those other videos, then you'll have a much fuller understanding of Lilith and where she appears in the scriptures. Because again, these two serpentine couples appear in numerous places in the scriptures. I'm just revealing but a few in some of these videos that I'm uploading, on my channel. Again, these videos are just meant to be an introduction into the holy mysteries. So now I'm going to proceed to explain some some parables, and explaining these esoteric parables from the scriptures that reveal this great holy mystery of these two Adam Qadmonim. Right. Again, we need to understand that the Torah is full of many arcane constructs, which the Torah uses to encode and encrypt the holy mysteries. Okay, and unless you are initiated into the holy mysteries, you won't know or understand these arcane constructs that are used to conceal and hide the holy mysteries. Now, here I'm going to reveal one such arcane construct, which is that essentially one such arcane construct that the Torah utilizes is that it will break up a holy mystery into different parts. It might break up a holy mystery into 5 parts, and those 5 parts will become parables. So one arcane construct is that the Torah will split up a holy mystery into certain parts, and each part will be given through a parable. Okay? And it is only through understanding all of the parables that you will understand all of the components and part of the holy mystery. Each part reveals an aspect or a portion of the holy mystery. But when combined together, you will then have a much more complete, full picture and understanding of that holy mystery. Okay? So again, this great holy mystery of these two Adam Qadmonim, of these two chief Elohim, is revealed through many parables. Okay, this is an example of this arcane construct. So I begin with the first parable, which is given in the Garden of Eden. Right there, we read that there are principally 2 Adams. One is superior and one is inferior. Essentially, Kabbalistically, the parable is explaining that Adam was given a first wife, who's Lilith, who committed adultery against him. Okay, and so as a result, Lilith became then Lucifer's wife. Lilith, Adam's first wife, committed adultery against Adam with Lucifer. Once she did that, she then became divorced from Adam and became Lucifer's bride. Okay, and then Adam is given a second wife, which is Hawa, and she too is defiled by Lucifer. Okay, and so essentially the narrative, is describing how this very powerful God, Lucifer, ends up hurting and bruising, Mashiach, right, by defiling his wives. Okay, so this narrative essentially is demonstrating how powerful and how great Lucifer is, and that he's actually hurting and bruising Mashiach by doing this. Okay, keep this in mind. Now we proceed to the second parable, which is then given through the narrative of Cain and Habel. Right, again, Cain represents Samael and Habel represents Mashiach. What is this parable revealing to us? Well, Kabbalistically, esoterically, right, we read in this narrative that Cain kills Habel, right? And this Kabbalistically represents the fact that at a certain period of time, Samael would end up killing Mashiach in the flesh, right? Habel represents Mashiach when he was in the flesh 2,000 years ago as Yeshua ben Yosef, who was slain and killed by Samael, right? This is the great Kabbalistic mystery, right? Again, Kabbalists understood and knew all of this well before and thousands of years before Yeshua, Mashiach, Yeshua HaMashiach, came on the scene. They already knew this, okay? So the point here is that there was Kabbalists, very highly initiated Kabbalists, in the generation of Yeshua and before, that understood all of that, with everything that was already going to happen. in the generation of Yeshua, with respect to Mashiach. Okay? Again, this is why we Kabbalists are the true Illuminati. We are the true illuminists. We are the only individuals that it can be truly said are illuminated by the great holy light of Ha-Elohim, okay? Not the Luciferians, okay? So let us move on now to the third parable, which is concerning the narrative of Jacob and Esau, okay? Again, Jacob represents Mashiach, okay? And there are many proofs from the scriptures that Jacob, is equated with Mashiach. I'll give an introductory one here first, before I reveal what's on the slide. We read in Sefer Bereshith, we read a description of this great dream that Jacob has of angels ascending and descending upon a ladder. Now, if you read that verse in the original Hebrew, the last part of the verse will basically state that Jacob saw angels ascending and descending upon it. The Hebrew word there for it is bo. That Hebrew word bo can either signify it or him, right? If you read it as it, then the reference is to the ladder. But if you read it as him, the reference is back to Yaakov. Now, the great Kabbalistic mystery here is that Yeshua HaMashiach, when he was here, stated, he said in the New Testament, Amen, amen, verily, verily, I say unto ye, the day is coming when you will see angels ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. Yes. Hopefully you understand the great mystery here. The Son of Man is the ladder, which is Mashiach, which is Jacob. It is a very, very esoteric and mystical equation, understood only by holy adepts and holy initiates like myself. And there are, of course, many other proofs, right? This is the great mystery of Sefer Bereshith, chapter 33, verse 20, where the literal translation that most English translations will provide is that regarding the last part of the verse, they will state, and he called it El Elohe Israel. In context here, Jacob is raising up a pillar. The last part of the verse goes on to state, and he, in reference to Jacob, calls it, the pillar, he called it El Elohe Israel, which in Hebrew literally translates as God, the gods of Israel. So from the English translation, you will then understand that Jacob is calling this pillar God, gods of Israel, which is a very, very unusual name to begin with, right? If you are fluent in ancient Hebrew and you're reading the verse in the original Hebrew and you first actualize that translation that I just gave, right? Because that translation sounds very weird, because the name given to the pillar is a very weird, unusual name. That's a mystical, Kabbalistic indicator telling you there are more better translations of the verse, meaning there are deeper levels of translation, more esoteric, more mystical levels of translation here. Now, if you're fluent in ancient Hebrew, right, if you're truly fluent in ancient Hebrew, you're reading the verse, within a couple of minutes of meditating on the verse, you can already see at least 3 possible translations of the text. Okay? Now, one very possible but very esoteric mystical translation, as we Kabbalists understand and read the text, is, and the gods of Israel called him El, God, him being a reference to Yaakov. This is how we Kabbalists translate the verse. This is a very correct translation of the verse. You have to understand that Hebrew is a supernatural language. It's a very polysemous language. It is a language that, has many arcane methods within it, in order to encode and encrypt holy mysteries. right? So there's a lot going on, basically, with ancient Hebrew text, essentially, okay? And unless you're a Kabbalist, unless you're initiated, unless you're fluent in ancient Hebrew, you're not going to be able to understand everything that I'm saying here, or be able to penetrate the deeper levels of the text, okay? But essentially, this is a correct translation of the text, but it's a very esoteric, a very mystical translation of the text at that, okay? So again, the Kabbalistic essence of this verse is that Yaakov is being equated with El, or God. It's very, very mystical, very Kabbalistic verse, and I don't even have the full time and space to give a proper disquisition on it, but all that needs to be understood for the purposes of this video is that this is a proof that, again, Yaakov is a divine being who's Mashiach, who is God, okay? Esau, on the other hand, right, represents Lucifer. Any Kabbalist knows this, okay? And it's if you understand the underlying Hebrew text, right, and you're a Kabbalist, you know all the proofs why Esau represents Lucifer, okay? I'll just give you a few examples, okay? Esau is from the Hebrew root asa, which means to make, which can also mean made up, which is how we refer to fiction, right? When we say something is fake or fiction, we say it's made up, right? Because again, he is the father of lies, right? Made up stuff, fiction is lies, essentially. That's why he's called the father of lies, okay? Also, Esau is the king of Seir, and in Hebrew, Seir may signify goat, which is an occult symbol for Azazel, which of course is related to Lucifer, okay? And there are many other proofs. I'm just giving here a few. When you become initiated, you read our Kabbalistic text, you read in the original Hebrew, everything will come together, and you'll easily see why Esau represents and is equated with Lucifer or Samael, okay? Again, Yaakov and Esau are twins, right? In the Garden of Eden, we are in the Garden of Eden, we are reading about two gods who are both called Adam. They both have the same name because they're twins. We know this because we are given that extra part of the mystery in this parable. Again, this is part of the arcane construct, right? This holy mystery, right, has been divided into certain parts or parables. Each parable contains extra information that is not supplied by the other parables. It is through this parable that we know that these two chief gods are twins. What is mystically alluded to in the first parable in the Garden of Eden is actually explicitly stated in the third parable. It's all interconnected. And this is the great secret why Esau is also known as Edom. Edom, when it is written in Hebrew, is written the same exact way as Adam. Yes. The divine well goes really, really deep. Everything is interconnected. So with that said, I now end this video by again reviewing some of the core concepts introduced in this video and attempting to provide a brief synopsis. Right, we have to understand that this great holy mystery is essentially the revelation of a very primordial heavenly drama that played out. Right, essentially it is a battle of supremacy between two twin brothers, okay? And a key point here, a very great powerful Kabbalistic secret, is that Lucifer is the eldest and most powerful because he's the firstborn. Remember, Esau was the firstborn. Cain was the firstborn. Okay? And this is what makes Lucifer so powerful and so great. Okay? I can reveal even more Kabbalistic mysteries that I won't reveal here, alluding to the great power of Lucifer. He's the firstborn, he's the eldest. Okay? It's not Mashiach. And but what we have here in the narrative, in this very, supernatural narrative, is that even though that Mashiach is the youngest, he's very, very subtle and wise. right? And the essence of this cosmic drama or heavenly drama is the revelation of how Mashiach, even though he's the youngest, how he happens to overturn and overcome and succeed his eldest brother Lucifer, right? Yaakov is very subtle, like a serpent, very crafty. He steals the birthright from Esau, who was Lucifer, right? So the end of the story is how, even though Lucifer began as the eldest brother, more powerful and greater than his youngest brother Mashiach, in the end, it is Mashiach who, in a sense, takes that all away from Lucifer. Right? This is the essence. This is the Kabbalistic gist and essence of this very primordial, esoteric, heavenly drama. And again, the holy word it's a very holy text, which is encrypting and ciphering all of these holy mysteries, right? The holy word is concerned with holy matters, whether they are future or primordial. Well, nevertheless, hopefully ye have eyes to see and ears to hear these holy mysteries. Shalom.